Love the book title, by the way. Hi,
Thank
this
you.
is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Sam Kelly, Kelly. And if you're watching this on my three returned YouTube channels, X, Rumble, Rockfin, you'll see the title of his new book, which I really enjoy the cover of it. And the full title is Human History on Drugs, an utterly scandalous but entirely truthful look at history under the influence. And it's a very broad scope. It's really nice, fun to read, and I highly recommend the book. I'm glad it came to my attention. I wasn't able to interview him earlier. I had obligations. I was in jury duty, but we made this happen, so I'm glad he's here. He's a history grad from Stanford University. He's on the autism spectrum, and his interest and passion for history have become an almost physical compulsion. He loves to dig up forgotten, weird historical stories and spends hours uncovering every last stubborn detail. As a deep believer that history can be as exciting as any Marvel movie, Sam aims to make history both engaging and accessible to all. And Human History on Drugs is his first book, hopefully not his last. There's also great drawings in here too, which I enjoyed and kind of brought light to the different topics and stuff like that. But he can talk more about that. So, Sam Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hey, it is great to be here. Thank you for having me so much. I'm really glad we were able to make this work.
Yeah, me too. So, for people who haven't heard your name, maybe not heard the book, maybe you can talk about your background, your research, and what led up to the publication in July 2025 of Human History on Drugs.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is my first published book. I'd only had a few. I had a few things published in various sort of like little online magazines, and I'd had one thing published in my alumni magazine, and of course I had a TikTok prior to this that was sort of a launching pad to see if people were interested in these ideas, and the response turned it out to be. It was so heartening and so rewarding to see that all these people were fascinated by the idea of wait, there's all these historical figures on drugs, and this is not some kind of made up historical fiction. This is real. This is documented. And I'm saying, yes, yes, it is. There are great stories that you haven't been hearing. And so the success of the TikTok was able to, I was able to leverage that and actually getting a book deal. And now the book is out. And so this has been, I've been researching and looking this stuff up for like it was almost like a 7-year process. So this is a work of a long time, and it's a labor of love. And I'm super happy that it's out there and people are buying it and appreciating it. Yeah.
So your TikTok, so would you have a different format than in the TikTok? Were you doing small video bits, or were you doing reading from historical texts?
Oh, it was very much like a short, punchy type thing. I would try and do like, relatively brief, like a half minute to a minute, sort of
Gotcha.
I would dispense like fun facts and try and make these fun, punchy things, like a cocktail party kind of like intro thing. And I would see if people would be interested in these. So I'd oftentimes do a series of videos in the same person. Sometimes I would do ones about topics instead. So it really varied. But those were much more short form. And so with this, I was thinking that I would get into doing like still I get it. So it's 40 chapters in the book, and each one's about like a 10-minute read or so. So it definitely is sort of like an anthology of different things, but this is more long form, obviously, because each chapter is like 3 to 5 pages, so it's
Were you surprised at how many people in history were on drugs? How many
um
famous people?
well, I mean, yes and no. I guess it was I always had this sense that there had to be a lot more than what you hear in a conventional classroom, but that people simply either they weren't aware or they felt like they weren't allowed to talk about those things in classrooms, which obviously there's always controversy over what's taught in schools right now. And so I can understand why a lot of people maybe didn't bring it up in a formal educational context. But in doing my own reading outside what I learned in class, there were so many amazing stories, and I just kept finding them. And I thought, I bet this is just scraping the surface. I bet if I dig deep, I can find so many more fascinating stories that are actually documented about all these people. And it turns out that I was completely correct, that I just had to dig deep and put it all together. But it was all the pieces were there. I just had to assemble them into this mosaic.
Right, and it goes all the drug use was almost like a standard staple thing, even in the old ancient world. Really, is where it all started. Like this quest for drugs was an important thing, almost like spices or
Oh,
something like that.
absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. So the drug use has been a fundamental part of the human experience for a very long time. I mean, obviously, a lot of drugs were not available until more modern technology was, but also a lot of them were like things like opium, cannabis, alcohol, uh, other drugs like that. People were using those before they had really gotten written language down. So these things have an incredibly long and storied history. Yeah, my book stretches back into ancient times. The first one in there is the Oracle of Delphi, talking about the Oracle of Delphi being in a cave, just marinating in psychoactive fumes, and then people in ancient Greece believing that that is the presence of the divine, and believing that the oracle could communicate directly with the gods. And yeah, Alexander the Great was a huge fan of opium and alcohol. In fact, he pretty much never lost a battle, but ended up drinking and drugging himself to death essentially because his immune system just shut down from all his drug abuse. So the only person he lost the battle to was him. But yeah, all
Was
these things,
alcohol, right? It was,
alcohol and
or
opium, that
opium, right? Yeah.
combination, what a
Yeah.
twofer. Yeah. But
The-
definitely the yeah, and the cover, that's Ramses the Great. And yeah, like cannabis in ancient Egypt, ancient India, throughout throughout these regions in ancient times, these were available and they spread from human contacts, just like human religions and cultures and other things like that do. So yeah, much like spice was traded, so were these things traded.
but it's interesting because even in our modern times, they say that we use drugs to enter a elevated state or happiness state or to reach the divine. Like that was kind of the big thing with you mentioned Leary in this book.
Yeah,
But that was
yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
they were doing it in the ancient world too, right? So it's nothing's
Absolutely.
new under the sun, so to speak.
Precisely, precisely. Yeah, obviously. I mean, nowadays we're much more aware of things like ayahuasca or psilocybin mushrooms or other things that indigenous Americans have used since ancient times. But those were not the only things. People in different parts of the world, everyone from shamans in Siberia were using Amanita muscaria mushrooms, a lot nastier than psilocybin, more likely to cause really unpleasant convulsions, other horrible side effects. But those people were using that in order to commune with the gods. People in all sorts of parts of the world would ingest these ritual substances. People in ancient Greece, there was a thing called the Eleusinian Mysteries where they consumed stuff like that. So yeah, this is a well-known thing from the ancient world that later efforts to create a moral panic about drugs. They don't like talking about it because it shows that no, this is not a new thing. This is as old as people being people.
Right. The Eleusinian mysteries are still like brought up as these mystery schools. So that's another kind of interesting aspect of the use of psychoactive substances is that they're kept. There's almost like a secret society in some of the use of this because you mentioned the Hashashin too, right?
Yes,
Can you,
absolutely.
can you talk about them?
Yeah, so the Hashashin were so they start out as they're an Islamic religious sect, and they're in a time where there is tremendous internecine warfare, and so they are working to actively assassinate their. That's where the word assassin comes from, right? But so they're a group of very dedicated religious people who want to remove their religious enemies, and they have the unique sort of sacrament of the way that they are introduced into this into this religious killer brotherhood is that they are brought to the palace of their leader, of the leader of the Hashashin Guild. And so
It's
they,
Hassan Isabah, right?
yeah, yeah, Hassani Sabah. And so he has this whole underground grotto set up, sort of a secret garden. And so he has all the guys consume hashish and they get really high. They pass out and he has them taken to his secret garden. So they wake up and they see this beauty and splendor, and there's attractive women there, and there's good food, and it seems like a vision of paradise, but it's on earth. And so he says, this is the kind of glory that can come to you if you are faithful and true and absolutely devoted to my movement. But that's only if now just and so he'd have them take some more, they pass out again, and then he brings them back. And they're thinking, what was that glorious? How did that happen? And he says, that is a preview of paradise, and that is where you will go if you follow my words exactly. And it turns out to be very successful. And so he has a small but dedicated group of very religious, very cannabis enthused individuals who they are absolutely loyal. And so some people might think, oh, how is it that like they're being good at stealthy assassinations if they're high? They're not really doing stealthy stuff. They are so loyal that they are willing to just run up and assassinate their enemies, knowing they'll probably be killed afterwards because they believe they've already seen a vision of the paradise that is to come.
Right. And this is recorded stuff like the Hassan, the Hashashin apparently gave a lot of the Crusaders a hard time. Like,
Oh yeah, no, they were very effective against their opponents in large part because they didn't have that fear of death. There's a widely told story where an opponent of Hassan Sabah is saying, you know, I have so many more men than you. Why is it that I shouldn't just march on you and defeat you? And he tells one of his men, go jump off that building right there. And the guy just turns around and does it immediately. And Hassan Sabah says, my men are absolutely loyal and they believe in a higher cause. Like, can your men claim the same? Um, and so this is a thing that is very potent for them. And honestly, their movement isn't really completely wiped out until the Mongols sack the whole region.
wow, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. But it's still there's still reference to this day, like the Hashashin, and we use that term just like you said.
Oh yeah,
Like
that's
that's a
the
hashish, yeah.
yeah, the hashish consumption. They get the term of these hashish eaters, so like hashashi, and so it becomes mutated by different languages, and so the Europeans adopt the word as assassin.
Right. I mean, it's really incredible how many of these people use opium or an opiate derivative or something like that, or a cocaine derivative. I mean, so many of our uh, known artists and like philosophers and psychologists were almost like junkie level type stuff. Like Freud
Oh
was.
yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So and that was actually one of the big inspirations for my book because like most people in college, I took a psychology class. I took psychology 101, and so it's like this is really fascinating stuff. And obviously, Freud is pretty important to the study of psychology. And so they're saying, now, this guy pioneers a bunch of the ideas that we use today. Now, some of his stuff is pretty out there. We don't believe in that anymore, but certainly Freud's idea of the subconscious mind that exists and drives a bunch of human behavior, even if we're not actively thinking about it, but it's shaped by our natural feelings and our experiences growing up and things like that. That is still widely believed today. But he has the same confidence in things like penis envy and the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex and other things that just seem absolutely insane. And so I was wondering, like, how is it that he has such an output, and yet he's equally confident in the things that are super crazy and the things that actually are still validated today? So I'm looking into his writings, and I see he wrote something called Uber Coca, and I'm like, coca, like coca leaves, like the stuff they make cocaine from. And so I read into it, and he's written this. It is basically this glorifying ode to to cocaine. He is just talking about how he thinks it's a wonder drug. He claims that it's not addictive. He believes that it can be used to treat all kinds of diseases. And it turns out Freud is super into cocaine, doing it every day for like a dozen years. A lot of his big period of like his peak activity period was him getting super into cocaine as a 20 something medical student and just completely going for it. And at this time, it was near peak mainstream acceptability and that it wasn't even illegal. Medical grade cocaine was very new to Europe and seen as a novelty. They just recently learned how to extract it from the plant as a concentrated substance. So a lot of the place where Freud is getting his cocaine from, he is just sending them letters saying, excuse me, I am a respected member of the medical community. Can I please have some free samples of your product? And they're just giving him medical grade cocaine for free, which is a big part of why he thinks it's not addictive, is that he never runs out of cocaine for over a decade.
Yeah, it's amazing. So a lot of his growth, like, is attributed to almost mainline dosing. Didn't you write like he shoved pure coke in his nose or something like that? Like,
He was very fond of taking cocaine in many ways. He did like to sniff it. In fact, he was so fond of sniffing cocaine that on more than one occasion he had to have a surgeon put a heated like scalpel in his nose to reopen his nasal passages because he messed them up by doing so much cocaine. And he also believed that was beneficial to other people. So at one point, he had, I think, a patient of his. He had them pack their nasal cavity with cocaine until it like partially collapsed, and somehow that didn't make him think, well, maybe this is a bad idea. He's
right,
like, maybe I just did it wrong in this case. I'm sure that if we just get the balance right, it'll work the next time, you know?
it was a
So
cure-all. Like that was it. Hey, you
that
can
was his
just smoke
belief.
miserable, depressed coke, baby. He's
That
almost
was,
like a drug dealer. That's an aspect of his thought. It's really amazing when you think
yeah,
about
no,
it.
he was just downright in love with cocaine and would not hear he would not hear many of the actually true negative things that it can do because he actually believed that he could that cocaine, because again he thought that it wasn't addictive. He thought
Right.
that cocaine could be used to treat heroin addiction, or morphine addiction rather. He believed that you could treat morphine and opium addiction by having someone switch to doing massive amounts of cocaine and then discontinuing it suddenly. When he actually tried this on one of his patients, the guy had a psychotic break and committed suicide not long after. But again, he still seemed to believe that you could use cocaine to treat addiction to other drugs.
It's just wacky, just like the kind of crank medicine and crank stuff that was really out there, and
Oh
it
yeah.
is it's really a part of our political history. You have to see drugs, like they say, the secret drug trade today is huge, but like you wrote that Queen Victoria is one of the biggest drug dealers of all time. A lot of people may not know that. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So yeah, so Queen Victoria had, before her, the British Empire was already growing and selling opium. I mean, they'd gotten control of most of India, and India proved to be an excellent place for them to cultivate opium. And they also found that, hey, people, once they get opium, really like it, and they keep buying more and more. We can make money off of this. So Queen Victoria looks and she sees that there's a trade deficit in her country. Because at that time, Britain is importing massive amounts of tea from China, but the Chinese don't necessarily want any products that the British are producing. So the trade imbalance is huge, and Britain is practically pouring silver into China's coffers. And Queen Victoria decides, well, I am going to change the balance of trade. What is something that I know people will want to buy more and more of? And she decides, we got these big reserves of opium in India. I'm going to sell them to people in China. And it turns out to be a big hit in China, like way too big of a hit. And opium is already illegal and frowned upon in China, but it wasn't as big of a thing then. So it soon became an epidemic where Britain is now making money hand over fist. They've reversed the trade imbalance, and now China has a massive and growing population of addicts, and it's getting worse. So the Chinese government is saying, like, do not do this. Stop selling illegal drugs in our country. And Queen Victoria is like, what are you going to do? Make me? And so eventually, one of the Chinese officials, he seizes a large ship full of opium and dumps all of the product in the water. And Queen Victoria is so absolutely furious, she declares war. And Britain ends up fighting two wars with China over Britain basically demanding the right to sell opium freely there. And that's where British control of Hong Kong, a lot of the foreign imperialism that creates like what China calls their century of dishonor, where foreign powers are able to carve out big chunks of the country and have more influence. An entire era of Chinese history is basically shaped by the British trying to force them to allow opium sales there. And at its peak, opium sales are probably, I think, maybe 15 to 20% of the entire British Empire.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. And it even reached into the US. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
think the guy who started Yale made money off opium trading and
Oh,
really,
yeah. Yeah, certainly at that period in time, it wasn't until, I mean, even up until about like the mid 19th century, opium was very widely available in Britain. A lot of Victorian artists were hopelessly addicted to it. Like in my book, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, writer of, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan, he was a massive opium addict. And yet he also helped
Poe, I don't think you have a section on Poe, but Poe was a laudanum. I thought you had a picture of laudanum use. Like he
Yes,
was that early.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
So laudanum is it used to be like this wonder drug where in the 19th century they had this stuff where it was opium suspended in alcohol. So it's like a drinkable form of opium that you can consume, basically sort of like the cough syrup of its day, but it packs one hell of a kick. And so the bottle would often have the dosage size given in drops, but because it was again up until there was the Pharmacy Act in Britain and certain later laws in the U.S. But for much of the 19th century, you could just walk into not even a pharmacy, but like a corner store, a pool hall, a barber shop, wherever, and buy opium in alcohol over the counter without a prescription. And so a lot of people who were supposed to be taking drops would just throw back whole bottles. There was no, they would say like, hey, is your baby teething? Just give a few drops to your kid. No big deal. It's a cure-all. So, and again, there's this belief that, I mean, sure, it was at the time a very effective painkiller, but also insanely addictive. Um, and so, yeah, up until that point, they were still selling it openly in Britain. And even when in a lot of the West, they started passing laws against it, they still have the issue of, well, we still have huge amounts. We have a surplus. We still have a bunch of this growing. What do we do with this? We have to move this product somewhere. And the obvious answer becomes just move it somewhere where either the laws are different or we just don't care about following those laws.
Right, it's incredible. I mean, and you write about the Pope liking this cocaine wine. Like they had really strange products there at the end of the 19th century, right?
Absolutely. The cocaine wine one is one of my favorite ones just because of. Again, obviously not the current pope. The current pope is Pope Leo the 14th, but the pope he named himself after, Pope Leo the 13th, who was like a late 19th century pope, that guy loves cocaine wine so much. I mean, he becomes pope when he's like 75 and is pope until he dies in his 90s. But he's also so energetic and he does so much for, like, in the history of the Catholic Church. They've had these big like documents of theological belief, these encyclicals. And there's been about 300 encyclicals in the history of the Catholic Church. And this one guy, Leo the 13th, wrote about 80 of them. And keep in mind, he was like 75 when he started being Pope. And so what's his secret? He would have, and at the time, you could just buy it in the grocery store over the counter. It was a drink called Vin Mariani, wine infused with cocaine. And the Pope always carried a flask around with him. And he said it was to fortify me when prayer is insufficient. But he loved it
But
so much.
that's his road to divinity. So you see the same theme all the way into the 60s and Leary and back to the rites of Eleusis and Hashashin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just want to go on a little bit more about that Pope because
Please do.
it's so great. So he loves this Vin Mariani stuff so much that not only does he say that, he summons the creator of the wine to the Vatican to give him a Vatican gold medal, and then the Pope appears in a full page advertisement for cocaine wine endorsing it. And
That's great.
that ad, you can see it in my book. That's real. That is
Wow.
totally real. And this
Wow.
same stuff, he was not the only celebrity or head of state who liked this stuff because Ulysses S. Grant drank it. Queen Victoria was also known to drink it. That's the funny thing. Queen Victoria liked selling opium to other people, but she herself liked some cocaine infused wine, some cocaine chewing gum. She was more of a cocaine gal. And yeah, and Thomas Edison did that stuff.
Right. That's so wild. The other thing that's interesting about the opium wars is that it's almost like a cycle of drug use because you have to see tea as kind of a intoxicant too. It may not be a serious one, but it should be categorized as some type of like I said, stimulant. It's a
Oh no,
stimulant.
it absolutely is. I mean, certainly caffeine is a drug. I just again in my book I make it pretty clear that like well caffeine and stuff like that are very much drugs. Caffeine is so relatively mild and so commonplace that it'd be like if I just talk about anyone who drinks tea, it feels kind of like they're am I really getting but absolutely no, tea in itself is a fairly low key, and it's much more psychologically than physically addictive, but it's definitely a drug of sorts. I mean, sugar really is a drug of sorts.
Well, that's true. Good point. But these, like, they're not all the consequences of these guys' drug use. They might have been taking it to relax or whatever, but a lot of these guys had deleterious consequences. I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Can you talk about some of them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a great example would be Alexander the Great. Again, so he like conquers. At that time, it was half of the known world to his people. He never loses a single battle. He is esteemed as a combination of genius on the battlefield, like physical virtue and intellectual virtue. He was trained, by he got the Aristotelian teachings, and so he is seen as
Directly from
someone.
Aristotle, yeah.
Exactly, directly from the source, and so he is seen as this brilliant person and a role model in many ways. But again, because he had such an addiction to alcohol and to opium, because even if you don't lose a battle, you're going to get banged up from fighting in that many of them, and so it makes sense why he started using the opium. But then he gets hooked on it. And as for alcohol, the guy was just a party animal. He was never he could never get enough. He was always wanting to conquer more. He had a very extensive libido. He liked, pretty ladies, handsome men. He liked all of that, and so the drinking heavily was part of that party scene. He worked hard and he played hard, and he played so hard that he basically destroyed his immune system with alcohol and drug use. So despite never losing a battle, he dies when he's 32, when he's my age, because him and his troops are partying in Nebuchadnezzar's palace after his troops get homesick and finally demand he turn back instead of conquering all of India. And
Right.
so
There was a famous speech, the revolted somewhere. I forgot what it was. Like they tried to like leave. Yeah, I remember that.
oh yeah, they were tired.
Yeah.
They're like, we're just gonna take the entire world. I want to go home.
Yeah, they weren't
And
even close to world conquest at the known time too. But there's other people too. Like you have to put in Nietzsche, Van Gogh,
oh,
Hitler. These guys
absolutely.
all messed up on
And
drugs.
yeah, and Nietzsche, it's such a wild story for him specifically, because Nietzsche was a very respected, like he had a doctor of philosophy and was a very respected, but because he was a respected academic, he was just referred to as Dr. Nietzsche in the community. And so he would just go in to pharmacies and with a prescription that he'd written himself and say, yes, I have a prescription for chloral hydrate and this opium. So can I please have so he would just constantly prescribe himself drugs despite not actually being a medical doctor. But
Wow.
they would just keep filling his prescriptions because they're like, you are so respected here. And so eventually Nietzsche ends up having a psychotic break from his drug abuse, and he gets put in a psychiatric ward where he writes letters where he believes that at different times he would state that he was Jesus or Napoleon or the Buddha. But also because Nietzsche, contrary to what a lot of people believe, Nietzsche himself was not he was not a nationalist or an anti-Semite. He'd expressed strong opinions against nationalism and against people who were bigoted towards Jews. But his sister was a hardcore sort of like a proto-Nazi. She believed a lot of the stuff the Nazis later would. And his sister got conservatorship over him after he was put in the hospital. And his sister wanted revenge for all of I mean, he really mocked his sister's philosophy. So his sister and her then husband, who was also a like Germanic nationalist white supremacist, they moved to a supposedly racially pure Aryan colony in South America. And so that collapsed, and her husband committed suicide. And when she get back, Nietzsche's like, it's like it's like you're a jerk. Your beliefs are terrible and your husband's are terrible, and I'm glad he's dead because he was an awful guy. And so she was very very angry about that. So she deliberately added a bunch of his stuff to include like rabid nationalism and to add anti-Semitism into his works where it didn't exist. And he still has that reputation as being like one of the Nazis' favorite philosophers, but not because of his own beliefs, but because his sister wanted revenge by besmirching his legacy. And it was possible for her to do that because he'd put himself
He
in a
was
mental hospital.
invalid. I
Yeah.
remember hearing stories where like people would say pay money to see the great Nietzsche, and he'd be in a wheelchair, like babbling to himself, and she'd take the money and like he was like a circus,
Oh, exactly.
show
Yeah,
or something like that. Yeah.
she'd show him off like she wanted to humiliate him
Yeah.
as revenge for him condemning her rabid nationalism and anti-Semitism. He was
Yeah, I remember stories like that. Like she kept him like a circus act or something like that. The poor guy.
So
and the famous like kissing of the donkey in Rome or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was the moment of his mental break. He sees someone beating a horse in the street, and it just breaks whatever was left of his sanity. And then after that, he was confined.
Right. And it's like that with Dick. Like, I mean, these things are so present. Like, even the opium wars, they're happening today it's just a different drug. Fentanyl is really a modern opium war.
Oh, exactly. It's just it's a different type of that, but at the same time, it's like the fentanyl has just these weird chemical stuff. Like for opium, at least you needed actual plants to grow it from, whereas fentanyl you can just make out of random crap that you buy from not you, obviously. People should not make fentanyl, but those who make fentanyl can make it out of random chemicals they get from sketchy suppliers in all sorts of countries. So it's definitely, and certainly it's smaller, it's more compact. So it's like it's like a weird evolution, but not in a good way.
Yeah, but it is interesting that these breaks and these people break. I mean, Hitler seems like he broke, and so did Philip K. Dick, all the way to a lot of people came out the other end of some of these human history on drugs, not in a good way. Like, I mean, I'm not an advocate of addiction in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was part of the vibe that I wanted to show a huge range of different stories. Like some people in the book have relatively benign effects, or they even feel like it enhanced their work. But obviously, plenty of others, it destroyed their lives, drove them insane, broke their potential. It did. So it's a huge, and I don't want to send the message overall that drugs are inherently good or bad. I feel like my sense that I got while writing it, and the one that I wanted to convey to others, was that drugs are more like tools. A tool doesn't have to be inherently good or bad. So a chainsaw and a butter knife are tools, but obviously it's a lot easier to mess someone up with a chainsaw than it is with a butter knife. But that doesn't mean they don't both have legitimate purposes. So I think that awareness and being educated about these things is very important. And again, I wouldn't be an advocate for like, let's just legalize everything, but certainly I think there's a lot of nuance here, and so it's important to focus on these different reactions.
I think these are cautionary tales too. Some of them are like there clearly are yes. people like if you read the section on Philip K. Dick, I had no idea he gobbled that much meth. But like, incredible. I mean, there's no. I'm not surprised he had some kind of break. But
just the realizing that he had so for the listeners there, you know how on Halloween they'll have like big bowls of like candies out, like M&Ms and stuff like that? He just had a big bowl of amphetamines in his kitchen, and he would just like take a handful of them and pop them, and he'd write cranked out of his mind. And so it got a lot of his work churned out there. But then if you look at the actual themes in his work, which again, it inspires so much brilliant science fiction, but like, you know, you look at like, we can remember it for Who You Wholesale, aka Total Recall, or you look at, you know, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, aka Blade Runner. There's so much of the amphetamine psychosis in the writing. Like, what if I'm a robot and I don't know that I'm a robot because someone has gotten into my brain and jacked it up so I think I'm a real. There's that whole vibe that what if everything I believe about the world is not real and I'm this close to snapping? And it's part of why his sci-fi is so intense and got adapted so much is you can really get the sense from his writing that he's both a very talented author, but that he understands that sense of, you can practically feel the mental disturbance radiating
Yeah,
out of
the
the
tension,
pages.
the paranoia, and walking on the edge of a blade or something.
Oh
Because
yeah,
he's
no,
he's going on like 2-3 day no sleep writing binges. Like incredible.
absolutely, absolutely. And so it's again, it is not surprising both that his work remains very well respected, and a lot of it seems even more prescient than it is. At the same time, he also had 5 failed marriages and died a premature death because his pancreas stopped working from massive drug abuse.
At
And so,
52, right? So
yeah,
52, he's gone, and I mean, he just burnt it out. Like it's just
yeah.
incredible. And that even that section had a lot of other writers who would do Speed, Ayn Rand, and other people. Like
Oh
that's
yeah,
a
Ayn Rand
yeah.
very much was a fan of Speed. Dalton Trumbo, all kinds of different writers would use it for different reasons. I mostly, I was sort of, he could had the, of all those authors, he had the most terrifyingly large consumption. Like just the sheer
Yeah.
volume. I don't understand how it didn't kill him much earlier than it did.
Right. Right. It's really unnerving. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
was his dedication, not to food, but to writing and meth.
Yeah.
That was it. Like you live and eat cat food or something like that.
Oh
I
yeah, and
gotta
it was a brutal cycle because it's like, well, so he's like, well, I had all these issues with paranoia and anxiety, so I dropped out of school. So now I got to support myself. I love sci-fi, but it doesn't pay that much, so I have to write a lot of sci-fi. What will help me write a lot of sci-fi? I can do amphetamines and crank it out, but then the amphetamine habit gets more and more expensive, so he has to keep doing amphetamines to write more sci-fi to pay for the amphetamines to write more sci-fi.
it's like a Scanner Darkly. It's a big cyclical use, right? Like
Absolutely. I
it's
mean,
so funny.
so much of that book was like, that book was partly autobiographical. He fictionalized a lot of elements, but a lot of the stuff about like living in a house where there's just addicts kind of coming and going, and this sense of your life is falling apart and not knowing what reality is, all of that was written from mostly from experience.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Incredible stuff. Well, before we wrap it up, we're at the 35-minute mark. Maybe you can talk about Alexander Shulgin. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that story of this kind of modern maker of psychedelics, right?
Yes, yes, Shulgin, such a fascinating story. So Shulgin is a guy who comes up in the middle of the 20th century, and so he gets to start working for Dow Chemical. He creates the first biodegradable not fertilizer, but like the first biodegradable pesticide, I think it was. And so he is considered to be a chemical genius. And so Dow Chemical says after this, we will let you work on whatever field you want. And he's like, there's this new field of these like psychedelic drugs. I want to work in that. And at the time, there isn't quite the moral panic yet. So he starts working on that. But he's a big believer in radical scientific transparency. So he tells other people what his methods are for making this. He creates a psychedelic amphetamine. He tells a guy, and that guy tells the Hells Angels what the recipe is. And so then the Hells Angels end up selling pills of a drug he made to a bunch of hippies at a counterculture event. There's a bunch of people at the Human Being doing his psychedelic amphetamine. Some of them freak out. And once they find out that he's made this drug that has been adapted by motorcycle gangs and sold to hippies, Dow Chemical says, we're sorry, man. Like, we love you, but we have to let you go. So he becomes this private scientist, but because he is so skilled he has both this acumen for creating. So he ends up in his lifetime creating over 230 psychedelic drugs, like creating them, which is astounding, and popularizing other ones. Like he didn't create MDMA, but he was one of the people to bring MDMA to the attention of both the medical community and to inadvertently, but because of his belief in just telling anyone who wanted to know about the drugs. Part of the reason why ecstasy became a party scene thing in the first place was because he told people about what it could do and how to make it. And so there's this weird thing where the DEA hired him and they kept him on as a consultant because they knew he was one of the masters of like, how does someone run a drug lab? How does someone create drugs? Because he would tell all of that stuff to their drug enforcement agents because he believed in radical transparency, but also because he believed in radical transparency, he wouldn't hide it from others either. So he ends up writing 2 books that that talk about the various drugs he's made and what his processes were. And I think eventually he for most of his life, he kept his medical research license to keep working in a lab and keep making new substances. But eventually, it became his job at the DEA became iffy after he would brief a lot of agents on how drugs are made, and then they would do drug busts and find his books as like the study materials that the drug makers were using. He was teaching both the drug enforcement officers and the drug creators.
Wow, that talk about Philip K. Dick. Wow, holy smokes.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I actually had a guy who wrote a book about Picard. Have you ever heard of that guy? He was like one of the great LSD creators too. And
I'm sorry. I immediately just thought of Patrick Stewart. I
it's
feel
like it's like he has that same last name, but he like it's a really interesting story. If you do a part 2 to this book,
I
they
will look into
literally
that. That is
bought an
fascinating.
old missile silo somewhere in the Midwest in Oklahoma or whatever, and started making massive doses of LSD.
That is
And
fantastic.
yeah,
That is
it's
a
an interesting.
fantastic.
Look up in my catalog. It's called White Rabbit. It's by McDougall. So
Will
really,
do. I will check that out. That is a good lead. Thank you for that.
yeah. If you ever write a part 2, I mean, we barely covered the surface. There's so many other topics: Jobs, McAfee,
Oh yeah,
Carl Sagan, Doc
so many
Ellis.
great stories.
Yeah, there's a lot of great other stuff in this book. Check it out. It gives you an idea the expanse of like in human history, just like human history on drugs, just like the title says. Do you have any chance? Can you take a couple questions?
Sure. Yeah.
I got this. This is my story. If you see on the bottom there, it says.
Oh yeah. Pushback from right in the book. Yeah. I mean, I feel like people were very supportive, but at the same time, I kind of had to. There was a while in my life where I thought I might want to be a classroom teacher, but in addition to all the other stuff that gets put on classroom teachers or professors, I just kind of figured that if I wanted to talk about this subject material, I could never actually be formally associated with an educational institution because no matter how nuanced I tried to make it, there would be a lot of people who are saying, well, why are you teaching people about these drugs? There would be this moral panic against it. So I think there would have been more pushback if I didn't do this as an independent person, not affiliated with a university or school.
Right. Sam, great to talk with you. Great presentation and congrats on your first book. I hope to see some more books in the future. For people who are interested, where can they take the next steps and buy Human History on Drugs?
Absolutely. My book is available on Amazon. There's the physical book, there's an ebook, there's the audio book, but it's available wherever books are sold. And in fact, there's a clearinghouse website. If you want to support your local independent bookstore, you can go to Human History on Drugs. Penguin Random House. Look up that. And it will have a list of all the places the book is sold. So whether you want to buy it, again, at like Amazon, I don't know, Target, Walmart, whatever, or you want to buy it at your local indie bookstore, those are all options. It's been very heartening. Barnes & Noble has loved my book. I keep getting pictures from other people of it on display at Barnes & Noble, and it just warms my heart every time. It's very nice.
That's cool.
So the book's widely available.
Widely available, and you can support your local independent bookstore instead of Amazon. I think Jeff Bezos has enough money. It's my take.
Yeah, I think he has enough money. Like,
I'm interested what kind of designer drugs all these other guys do. That's the whole thing. Like,
oh yeah,
like Elon Musk is doing psychedelics and drugs and massive.
Oh yeah, I don't want to make any disparaging claims that will get me sued by any wealthy, still living people, but many tech persons whose identities I will not hint about are many of these guys are fond of these novel sort of. There's designer drugs, there's like analog substances, and a lot of these guys have also gotten into the more unconventional, like psychedelics that used to be considered just like anesthetic, like ketamine and stuff like that.
Right,
that's had like a resurgence.
Again, microdosing, macrodosing, like just like really kind of psychonaut type stuff,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of these guys are real into the whole sort of like almost like an Epicurean desire to experience all these things.
Yeah, it's really well said. That's really well said, especially like the Bay Area. That's where Shulgin was. A lot of these guys are Bay Area centered. I think.
Yeah, that's where the Grateful Dead came from.
Bay. Yeah, Dick was in the North Bay. Anyway, great to talk with you. And I think you said at the outset when we were talking, you have an active TikTok channel and Instagram.
I'm on TikTok and Instagram. Yeah, on TikTok, it's Human History on Dergs, because apparently you can't say drugs if it's spelled correctly, but magically it will become, I guess they think if you spell it correctly, people will want to do drugs, but if you don't, they'll be like, oh, well, now we see what drugs have done to you. But so it's Human History on Dergs on TikTok, and on Instagram it's Human History on Drugs, because they just didn't care enough to be like, like I'm obviously not selling any substances.
Right.
I am trying to. The way I see it, my book is a gateway drug to learning and awareness, not to drug use.
Totally agree with you. It's also, there's cautionary tales in here. Some of these people
absolutely,
did not end up well, so it's not like, guys, this is the gateway to the divinity. Some of these people did not. They ended up in the gutter, guys.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not like cheerleading for drugs. I'm not trying to demonize drugs. I'm trying to present this image of people have used drugs for all these reasons, and there's been a huge spectrum of different results they've had. But I think the most interesting thing is that the most valuable thing is how fascinating and how much we can learn from others' experiences and just how good the stories are.
Very well said. Great way to end it. Thanks for joining the show. Again, it's Sam Kelly, Kelly. And the full title of the book is Human History on Drugs, an utterly scandalous but entirely truthful look at history under the influence, just published 2025. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, stay there. Stay there. Stay there for just for a second.